Hyperhidrosis, also known as cold sweats. This is a fight or flight response to a perceived threat. It is a form of a panic attack. There is a legitimate and real sense of danger based on a past experience. For example, avoiding large crowds so as not to get trapped. The response consists of psychiatric symptoms and physiological symptoms. When there is a degree of apprehension, then these two sets of symptoms tend to look and feel alike. Symptoms include fatigue, dizziness, indigestion, abdominal pain, headache, insomnia, and chest pain. The fight or flight response is entirely physiological and controlled by a primitive part of the brain called the sympathetic nervous system. It is precognitive, that is, it occurs before any thought or awareness. It's automatic, it involuntarily triggers, and it is nearly instant. It's already in motion before awareness even occurs. This is the protective system that allows a mom to save her child from a speeding car. It's fast, it's strong, and it's decisive. Unfortunately, the sympathetic nervous system in this case works against us in its way of trying to help us. Let's walk through a scenario of the primitive brain as if you were in a jungle someplace and a wild animal jumped out in front of you. First, a threat is encountered. The sympathetic response system triggers immediately. It releases adrenaline, which increases your heart rate and increases your respirations. It anticipates that your body will become overheated, so it produces sweat. Essentially, it's all hands on deck, ready for a fight or flight response. Then you do the fight or flight. You expend energy. Your body temperature goes up. Sweat production increases even more. The sweat evaporates, which lowers your body temperature. You redirect blood flow to your vital organs, which reduces the temperature of your hands, reduces the temperature of your feet, and starves your brain of oxygen. This continues until all resources are expended. Then the parasympathetic response system kicks in. The adrenaline has been depleted, which causes your heart rate to slow. Your respirations slow. You start conserving energy by lowering your body temperature and reducing sweat production. The sweat evaporates, bringing your temperature down to normal. Your body has now returned to homeostasis. Let's walk through the scenario of a panic attack. First, a threat is perceived. The sympathetic response system fires just as before. It releases adrenaline, your heart rate goes up, respirations go up. It anticipates overheating of your body, so sweat production starts. It's all hands on deck. Next comes the fight or flight. However, in this case, there is no fight or flight response, so there is no expenditure of energy despite the body being prepared to deliver it. So you end up having the sweat evaporate and your body temperature goes down. And this can cause you to feel a little panicky, maybe hyperventilating from the adrenaline, and you might feel clammy because you're all wet. Without resolution, the body is left in a state of discomfort, causing anxiety that can be perceived as a threat, which perpetuates the fight or flight response. So what doesn't happen is you don't have the parasympathetic response system to return you to a state of normalcy. You want to go back to having all hands on deck, but you've already released the adrenaline, so that can't happen again. But what can happen is an HPA axis response. And this is just a continuation of that sympathetic response, but in this case it releases cortisol into your bloodstream. Your pain threshold goes up, your rational thinking is reduced, and the memory accuracy of what is going on at the time is also reduced. Essentially anything that does not facilitate fight or flight is reduced in your body. This allows you to continue the sympathetic response. At the same time, you now have an anxiety response, a psychiatric response, where you catastrophize, causes blurring of psychiatric symptoms and the physiological symptoms. The threat intensifies. It also causes you to produce apocrine sweat, which is commonly known as the stress sweat. It's a protein-based liquid that is pasty and very uncomfortable. Psychiatrically, you're saying step on the gas, which triggers continued sympathetic response and more release of cortisol. Continued release of cortisol can go on for a long, long time, but it results in you feeling keyed up, wet, and cold. If it continues for a long period of time, you can become decompensated, where you start shaking. You have bladder control problems, a flushed face, hearing loss, and dry mouth. Anxiety begets anxiety, which can result in future panic attacks as the sympathetic response system is triggered by the physiological symptoms associated with this anxiety. So what do you do about it? Well, here are some suggestions. You can either intervene or you can try to prevent. To intervene, break the cycle of sweat by learning to tolerate that it is an unwanted but normal response to a real threat. Try stepping in place or some other light exercise to satisfy your physiology rather than breaking into a sweat. You may need to work into the sweat that you already have. Distract yourself, walk around, name things in the room, count things, watch your favorite TV show, retreat to a safe spot, allow yourself to be by yourself. Journal. Write down current negative thoughts and draw arrows to show patterns of cyclical thinking. Breathing. Slow, measured breaths. Actually use a timer to do this. Hold your breath for a few seconds at peak to avoid hyperventilation. To prevent hyperhidrosis, reframe your thinking to be more animal-like when encountering a threat. It's only about the physiology. This is coming from the very primitive part of your brain, so you need to think of it that way. No anticipating what might happen, no remunerating negativity, no value judgments. Defend yourself by taking care of yourself, and then it's going to be over. It's purely a physiological, primitive, animal-like response to a real threat.